Hello. Today's story is a little bit different. Not about leprechauns and fairies, but about the music of Ireland. And we'll start out with a poem by one of Ireland's greatest writers, James Joyce. It's called Strings in the Earth and Air. Strings in the earth and air make music sweet. Strings by the river where the willows meet. There's music along the river, for love wanders there. Pale flowers on his mantle, dark leaves in his hair, all softly playing, with head to the music bent, and fingers straying upon an instrument. The story I've got for you today is about music in Ireland and musicians, and it's called The Traveling Men of Ballycoo, and it's a story by Eve Bunting. Now, Cathal, Sean, and Jimmy O'Malley, three brothers, were the traveling men, and there were those who said they were maybe the greatest traveling men that Ireland had ever seen. They had no place that they called home, though Simey Rooney had left them a cottage in Ballycoo when he passed on. No matter. The whole length of the land was theirs, for they were the traveling men, taking their songs and music with them wherever they'd go. Cathal played the penny whistle. He had a tune called The Hunt, and in it you could hear, plain as day, the high, wild keen of the hunting horn, and the gallop of horses, and the bark of dogs as they lit out after the hare. There'd be sounds of hounds yelping and slavering, and in the end, the terrible squeal of the hare, real enough and true enough to chill the blood in your body. There was many a man heard Cathal play and hung up his boots to hunt no more. Sean played the fiddle, bent near in two over the top of himself, every bit of him jigging to his music. He'd fiddle so mightily that the rosin he rubbed on his bow rose and hung like a mist around his head. Young Jimmy played the melodeon, which is a type of accordion. He had a tune, a march it was, and you could have sworn a whole brigade of pipers was tramping over the nearest hill, three abreast, their kilts blowing around their bare red knees. All of that came out of a box thing, no bigger than a penny loaf of bread. None of the three was for marriage. Didn't they have all they needed in each other, with their music to share, and a royal welcome wherever they went? Cathal always had the right word for everything. It's the great life we have, he said. We're taking joy and spreading it from place to place and leaving it behind us when we go. What more can a man ask? Nothing, Sean said. Nothing, young Jimmy agreed. Maybe it was too great to last forever. It seemed to the traveling men afterwards that the years had gone by without their noticing them. Sean was the first to take bad, with the pains in his back. So Cathal and Jimmy got a fine gray donkey by the name of Mrs. Murphy to carry him. She had eyes big and shiny as two licked stones, and a back as wide as the valleys between the Mourne Mountains. When Cathal got the aches in his two legs, Mrs. Murphy was fit enough to hold both him and Sean, and young Jimmy helped them on and off her back. The people were still glad to see the traveling men. Weren't they the same good old boys that they'd always been? And wasn't their music as fine as ever? They'd be invited in and given mugs of tea. Mrs. Murphy had a corner to herself, and there was always a blanket for Cathal's legs and another for Sean's back, and a jar of homemade liniment for them to take along when the music was done for the day and the traveling men moved on. But it was getting harder for them to move on. It was getting harder for them to move. There's nothing for it but to settle down, Cathal said. We'll stop traveling and live in one place, same as everyone else. We're not that young anymore, which was true. Even young Jimmy was close to 70 years old, and he'd lost half of his good strong teeth. "It's called making the best of a bad job," Cathal said. Cathal always had the right word for anything. And so they went to Ballycoo. Simey Rooney's cottage was tight and dry, and they settled into it like old birds into a warm nest. In time, they got for themselves a big soft dog they called Red Rory and a cow called Maggie, and it was surprising how good everything was. But the evenings were the best. Sean would take up his fiddle and rosin up his bow, and Cathal would blow a tender breath into his penny whistle, and Jimmy's bent fingers would dance across his melodeon. The notes flew around their heads like quick white moths, taking away every ache. The fire sparked up the chimney, and Red Rory slept in its warmth. They'd play Long Slender Sally and The Dark Woman of the Glen, and sometimes Red Rory would beat his whiskery tail on the floor and smile in his sleep when the sweet, slow dusk came settling into night. They were good times, to be sure, but there was something wanting. It was Cathal who put the word to it. "It's right and fine for us playing for ourselves and getting the good of it, but we're used to sharing the music we make, and it's not ever as sweet when it's kept to ourselves." They thought about it, but it was young Jimmy who had the idea to hang the paper on the door. It said, "Music Nightly. Come and be welcome." "We'll wait and see what transpires," Cathal said. They didn't have long to wait. That very night, there came a knock on the door. There were 3 children outside. "We heard you playing, and we read your notice. Can we come in a wee while and listen?" "Indeed, and we're glad to have you," Sean told them. And that was that. Soon the word got out that the greatest traveling men that ever were had come to rest in Ballycoo. And there was never a night without music and friends to savor it. "It's better now, isn't it?" young Jimmy asked Cathal. "Aye, now it's complete," Cathal said. Sometimes they'd push the settle-in stools against the wall, and there'd be steppin' to Big John's reel. Sometimes there'd be music just for the listening, bringing fairies into the wee, warm room, or storms at sea with waves so fierce you were afeard of drowning. Sometimes you'd be in a forest with the birds singing their shining songs, or you'd be in India, the snake charmer piping his snake like a rope from its curly basket. One night, when the visitors had gone, the traveling men lay side by side in their 3 feather beds. Rain beat on the outside thatch, and the room was warm with the smell of liniment. "Since we travel no more, we can't very well be called the traveling men, now can we, Cathal?" Jimmy asked sleepily. "What should be the name for us now?" Cathal scratched at his beard. "Don't we go places every night of our lives? And don't we take all here along with us? Traveling men we were, and are still, and always will be." Jimmy smiled and closed his eyes. Cathal always had the right word for everything. And that's the story of the Traveling Men of Ballycoo and their music and the way they found. Thanks for listening. Stay well, study, and read. Read every